Welcome to Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be talking about When Harry Met Sally. So for those of you who have been following my channel for the past couple of months, first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who has liked, subscribed, and commented on my videos. Really means a lot. Then you guys would be aware that I talk a lot about genre movies, kind of your traditional action, sci-fi, horror movies. But one of the genres that I haven't talked about yet is romantic comedies. And some of you may be surprised to learn that I'm actually a big fan of romantic comedies, but I have to mention that when it comes to the rom-com genre, it's probably the genre that I am the pickiest about. The best example of that is, there's a lot of kind of cheapo horror movies and sci-fi movies that I enjoy that kind of fall in the it's so bad, it's good category. So I'm very lenient on those genres. When it comes to rom-coms, in my opinion, there is no so bad, it's good rom-com. When a rom-com it's bad or just bland, it's awful to me, and I absolutely hate it. So I have a very high standard for rom-coms, and a big reason why I even have a high standard to begin with is because of this movie right here. In my opinion, When Harry Met Sally is the gold standard for rom-coms, and I absolutely adore this movie. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I know I say that a lot, but in this case, when it comes to When Harry Met Sally, whenever I think of like my top 10 movies, this is a film that I often think about putting on that list because I've seen it so many times and I laugh every time I see it. I'm filled with joy every time I watch it. This movie is just so incredible for so many different reasons, which we're going to get into. But it is a movie that has kind of low-key ruined like maybe 85% of rom-coms. There's a handful of rom-coms out there that I really do love and enjoy. But there's so many that are just bland, generic, uninspired, featuring characters that are your standard archetypes and love stories that just feel disingenuous and just very cookie cutter. And that's like 90% of rom-com movies out there, and there's only really a small amount of rom-coms, in my opinion, that reach the level that I need in order for me to enjoy the genre. And like I said, a lot of that goes to When Harry Met Sally. So let's get into it. When Harry Met Sally was directed by Rob Reiner and written by Nora Ephron. We should talk about Rob Reiner for a minute. He has one of the most impressive director runs ever, and it doesn't really get mentioned a whole lot. Like his run of movies in the 80s alone, you got This is Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, of course, When Harry Met Sally, and then you go into movies like Misery and A Few Good Men, and it's like the dude has just made bona fide classic after classic after classic, and he definitely deserves to be mentioned along with some of the great American filmmakers of our time. And he can kind of direct a little bit of everything, as he's proven through his films, which is pretty impressive. But this is definitely one of his best movies, and a lot of that goes to Nora Ephron. Nora Ephron is very well regarded in the rom-com community, not only because of this movie, but also because of Sleepless in Seattle, which was also directed by Rob Reiner. But truth be told, I don't really like Sleepless in Seattle. I think that movie's not very romantic. I think Meg Ryan is kind of a stalker in that movie, and I just don't buy that love story at all. It's kind of hard to believe that it was written by the same person who wrote this movie, because the thing I love about When Harry Met Sally, maybe more than any other rom-com, is that our characters feel real. They feel genuine. They're flawed. They're not perfect by any means, and they don't even really like each other when they first meet. The film spans like 12 years, I think, in total. Like Harry and Sally, they first meet when they're in college, and they kind of road trip to New York for the first time, and they kind of try to get to know each other, and they don't really like each other. Harry thinks Sally is a bit of a stuck-up, prudish, very tightly wound individual, and Sally thinks Harry is very crude and lacks empathy. And they just, right off the bat, they don't really like each other. And they're like, oh, that's a shame because, you know, we're both going to New York for the first time and you would be the only person I knew in New York. And they're like, well, at least we'll probably never see each other again. Then they run into each other a couple of years later at an airport, and they ride the plane together. And their interaction is more or less the same as the first time around. Harry mentions specifically that he believes that men and women can't truly be friends in the traditional platonic sense because sex will always kind of complicate the relationship. He kind of pulls back on that a little bit when he runs into her again on the airplane because he's married now. He's like, that's the rule. If you're married, then you can be friends. Then more years pass as they assume that they're not going to run into each other again. And then they do. And then this time they've both been run through the ringer of relationships and a marriage. They're both divorced, and they're both feeling kind of bitter and insecure when it comes to relationships. And because of that, they end up becoming really good friends and they end up bonding with one another. And it's one of the reasons that I love this movie so much is because, you know, their relationship it's not love at first sight. It's kind of, a lot of this movie kind of breaks or kind of messes around with the traditional cliches and conventions of rom-coms where it's like, you know, it doesn't follow that stereotypical boy meets girl kind of thing. Like it kind of subverts expectations, if you will. Not to say that this movie is without cliches. Of course it has cliches. That's one of the reasons why the movie's enjoyable. But those cliches work because they're expertly written by Nora Ephron, wonderfully directed by Rob Reiner, and of course the chemistry between Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan is simply outstanding. And one of the other things that should be mentioned is that throughout the movie there's these little vignettes of these older couples telling their stories about how they met their spouses. One thing that I found out recently is that those stories are all true stories. They're reenacted with actors, but Nora Ephron talked to a lot of older couples when she was working on the script for When Harry Met Sally, and so she used all of these true stories that are kind of you see throughout the movie about how people have fallen in love with their significant others. And one of the things I really love about that is that it shows no love story is the same. And nobody finds the love of their life at the same time as somebody else does. It gives this movie that human touch, that touch of realism that you don't really see in most rom-coms, which feel very formulaic in comparison to this. So Harry and Sally, they end up being friends, and they end up really getting to know each other, really getting to enjoy each other's company while still having those little moments of annoying each other, which is great. We see that throughout the movie. And then we even see them in other relationships as they're both still being friends with one another. There's a great side plot in the movie where they introduce their best friends to each other, who they were initially going to date, but the two friends end up dating each other. One of them's played by Carrie Fisher. And they end up getting married while Harry and Sally are still trying to figure out their relationship stuff. And then it gets complicated when Sally ends up grieving over the fact that one of her exes is getting married and that she's in a relationship that she doesn't see going into the future. Harry goes to comfort her, and like Harry said, it's difficult for men and women, single men and women, heterosexual men and women, to be friends because sex can complicate things, and that's exactly what we see, is that Harry and Sally, they end up sleeping with each other, and Harry thinks this is a big mistake, and one of the funniest camera reveals in the movie, where after they sleep together, the camera kind of pulls out, and you see Harry's very shocked and like, uh-oh, this was probably a mistake face. And then from there, they spend time apart because Sally's very upset with how Harry reacted to that night. And he thought he was being very cold and distant, and it was really upsetting to her, understandably. And then from there, we get that Harry's realization that Sally is in fact the one, and that he's just kind of been afraid of commitment and afraid of losing their friendship also, but he decides to roll the dice because he realizes this is the woman he wants to be with. And that's how we get probably the greatest monologue in any romantic comedy ever. The scene where it's on New Year's Eve, and once again kind of subverting expectations. Instead of them finding out that they love each other and kissing right at midnight and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year, they're still bickering in the once the countdown to New Year's Eve is over, and then that's when Harry gives one of the most iconic monologues ever.
I love that you get cold when it's 71 degrees out. I love that it takes you an hour and a half to order a sandwich. I love that you get a little crinkle above your nose when you're looking at me like I'm nuts. I love that after I spend a day with you, I can still smell your perfume on my clothes. And I love that you are the last person I want to talk to before I go to sleep at night.
It's so wonderful. And then the movie ends on the beautiful note is that Harry and Sally are now like these two couples that have met each other, and that compares to the other vignettes of the older couples we've seen throughout the movie. They're now married, and they're telling how they met each other and how it took 12 years to do so. And it's perfect. When Harry Met Sally, it's not just a perfect rom-com, it's a perfect movie. It really is. I don't have any complaints about this movie. I think the writing is fantastic. For me, when it comes to rom-coms, it has to be two things. And it's in the title. It has to be funny, and it has to be romantic. And you'd be surprised at how many rom-coms out there, or maybe you wouldn't, depending on how well-versed you are in the genre, how many rom-coms out there fail at being both. How many that just don't feel romantic and or funny. Love Actually, I'm looking at you. I fucking hate Love Actually. That's going to be a video for another time, because I am going to rip that movie to shit. I think Love Actually is horrendous for so many different reasons. Video for another time. But yeah, that's When Harry Met Sally. It's also a movie that I revisited because we're getting into the fall season, and this movie has a very cozy fall vibe. There's a great scene where Harry and Sally are walking through New York, and the leaves are beautifully orange, and it's just a cozy movie that's so sweet, and it's like just around 90 minutes. I mean, this movie covers so much time between these characters, 12 years, and it's still able to put it in a 90-minute runtime, and it's perfect. It's a short and sweet movie that gets everything right, and I feel like there's been no other rom-com, really, that's come out after this film that is quite measured up to its perfection. When Harry Met Sally is the perfect romantic comedy. This is the standard that romantic comedies have to measure up to, in my opinion. So anyway, guys, that's my thoughts on When Harry Met Sally. I absolutely love this movie. But tell me your thoughts. Do you love it? Do you like it? Have you not seen it? What are your thoughts on this movie? What are some of your favorite rom-coms? List them down in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching.